Hi, everyone. Thank you. We have one more session for today, which is a workshop that will be facilitated by the wonderful Cathy Duncan, who is a senior lecturer in social work from the University of Wollongong. Cathy, I might hand over to you to introduce the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you. So just for our last session, we're going to do a little bit of an overview around participatory action research and what that means when we're working with carers. All right. Before I start, obviously I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands that we're here on today, and also the lands that I live on and on the South Coast as well. And in acknowledging the traditional owners, I also want to acknowledge Indigenous ways of knowing and being and doing, and how important that is when we're talking about caring, because I think a lot of when we conceptualise in care, we do it in the context of white Anglo understandings of care and caring. Okay. All right, now to start us off, we've got a quick quiz on where we stand. I'm going to talk a little bit about research paradigms, research of theoretical frames, which underpin our methodology and methods, and our positionality. And there's varying positionalities evident in this room from the presenters. Quickly introduce action research, and then we're going to do a group activity about co-analysis of some survey data. And so if I was to ask you to share your responses, there would be potentially a variety of responses around the room. And why is that? Why are we going to respond differently to those questions as researchers? What underpins those front of mind responses that we have? The other factors, worldview, that impacts how we answer these questions, and we do have a skewed representative in this room, obviously, is our research paradigm. And so what we're going to talk about now is what does the research paradigm look like where we're respecting carers in co-creation of knowledge. And just a few questions. So as a researcher interested in carer research, you are researching with human beings, so you are critical to the research process. So we're not researching things in a science lab, we're researching people. Impartiality in human research is a myth. Don't shoot me down. We need to acknowledge our biases. Does anyone really react violently to that? Is anyone? Yeah. I worked in a research centre for 7 years as a research fellow prior to getting into social work lecturing and doing more social work focused research. And I was regularly shot down in that context. It was a large research centre where we were primarily doing big quant studies, and some of this stuff was very foreign and very dismissed in that context. What assumptions do you bring to the research design, process and outcomes? Awareness of your own positionality allows you to minimise bias and remain ethical in your conduct. Communication of your positionality allows you to build trust with your participants, co-researchers, and provides an ethical basis from which to build your research activity. For those of us who regularly engage with thematic analysis of qualitative data, we're very familiar with Braun and Clark. Their later publications, their early publication was around the 6 steps. Their latest publications are around reflexive thematic analysis. Okay, and so what they say is you cannot enter a theoretical vacuum when doing thematic analysis. We don't become robots. Paradigmatic, epistemological, ontological assumptions inescapably inform analysis. Thematic analysis is treated as an atheoretical method through researchers failing to specify their theoretical assumptions informing their engagement with thematic analysis. And so what they're really saying in their later work is they feel like they've been misquoted a little from their, people just use the 6 steps. And what they're saying is if people are doing even inductive analysis, you need to articulate your theoretical frame and your positionality, because that underpins how you're actually going to do that analysis. And it's important that we're upfront about where we stand and any biases. Okay, I'm assuming everyone in this room is at least familiar with epistemology. I know sometimes ontology gets a little bit neglected, and how that ontology and epistemology align with methodology and methods. Yeah. So epistemology is the nature of knowing. So it's what we think, how knowledge is created. And what about ontology? Ontology is less, is spoken about less, but just as important as epistemology. Epistemology is the nature of being. So what do we think about? What do we think about the world, and how is knowledge created? And if you think of those 2 questions, that then leads you in certain directions around your methodology and your methods. Okay, so in our theoretical framework, we're aligning our methods and methodology with epistemology and ontology. And so if I went around the room and had a look at how you answered those questions, you would be giving me clues about where you stand with your epistemology and ontology, because they shape how you will then approach doing research. And again, just remembering and acknowledging Indigenous epistemologies around the world are often not given forefront recognition in terms of the traditional, primarily white Anglo approaches in research. Okay, so this is my theoretical frame as I applied in my my thesis, my Participatory Action Research study with carers. So ontology is the nature of being. Why is a relational ontology relevant in carers? So what we did in my carers group, the Carers Action Group, the study was around there's experiences of care recognition or misrecognition in the context of the marketisation of the home care packages program. So when we marketise, we create private for-profit incentives, and we individualise. So at the same time, we had the consumer-directed care, which meant that the programs were very much based around the individual care recipient. Carers were silenced. So as happened in disability reform as well. So what we did with Photo Voice, and it did expand out, I asked the Carers Action Group to reflect about their experiences of care recognition through, it became just through generally visual arts. So some brought photos. Some of those photos were around a service provider who was particularly flexible in, say, arranging. There was one lady who was caring for her mother who was Russian. She had a care worker. The lady was non-verbal in English, and she had a Russian care worker that had been organised, as well as another worker who'd been organised who was very qualified in the hands-on sort of nursing side of things. And for this carer, the photo of, and I think she said, just knowing how to manage just the hair and just being sensitive to some of those cultural issues that her mum really needed at that end stage of her life. So for that carer, it was very much around relationships. It was very much around, what was meeting her mum's needs at the time. Another carer brought a photo along of, he was caring for his mum, and the photo was actually of him, of a cottage. It was actually in Cradle Mountain. It was snowing, and the cottage, a cabin, sorry, not a cottage. His mum was safe back at the hotel, and he was just out walking on his own. And when I looked at the photo, my interpretation of it was, oh gosh, that person's struggling with feelings of isolation. And it was just, but no, that wasn't how he described it. The key to Photo Voice is the the people who take the photos have to, it's their interpretation of what that means. And so his interpretation of that was that he had found this beautiful balance of being able to holiday with his mum, who was unable to do anything other than sit in the motel. He knew she was safe. He had been able to go for this beautiful walk, and he was just feeling this sense of peace and solace where he was. So the idea of photo voice, and the reason why photo voice fits particularly with feminist epistemology, is that it's another dimension of how we know. So it's actually tapping into other sensory ways of knowing, other than just discussion, interviews. So positionality. So even just listening to the presenters today, we've had, I've picked up whether you've indicated that you're an insider researcher, in that you're a researcher who has a lived experience of caring, and or whether you're an outsider researcher. And that may just be because you hadn't disclosed your research, your caring experience in your research. But it's really important that we can also articulate whether we're insiders or outsiders. And I won't go through this whole thing, but basically you're an insider in collaboration with other insiders, insiders in collaboration with outsiders, reciprocal collaboration, outsiders in collaboration with insiders, outsiders studies insiders. So that's more the research on way of traditional research. Okay, so how would you describe your positionality, your epistemology, ontology, and are you insider, outsider in relation to your carer research? So I think if we're able to do that, then as going back to the Braun and Clark article about reflexive thematic analysis, we're just being upfront with our research audience, our carer participants, about where we stand and what worldview we bring to our research. And so the key points there is that it's research with, not research on. We need to really be very careful around the term co-design, and the example given today was absolutely beautiful, but co-design can sometimes be a bit tokenistic, and I've heard that from the carer representatives as well. And so the difference between, or the key feature is in action research is we're not just getting carers to actually assist us with designing the project, is we're actually respecting their knowledge, that collaborative and co-creation of knowledge in sense making, and that's co-analysing data. And that was very much a key feature of the research I was doing with my Carers Action Group. So we were co-conceptualising a framework for carer recognition in the home care packages program. It was an iterative process. It is a long-term process. I did make a statement at the beginning about how it takes too long and it costs too much. There is certainly a degree of truth in that. But it's an iterative process, and it's also applied research, because if you're engaging with people and communities impacted by the area of study, then there's an innate application. It's not as if we do our research and then we think about knowledge translation afterwards. It's embedded in the mindset of participatory action research. Participatory action research is emancipatory, or has a social change agenda from the beginning, and certainly in my research, our agenda was to inform the aged care policy reform process, which attracted the carer participants in the Carers Action Group. We also partnered with an aged care provider, and so the carers were co-analysing data from the aged care provider, who was in fact a model provider in respecting carers, and so that gave the carers a different perspective, a different insight into the challenges aged care providers face now in delivering carer respectful home care packages. Now things have changed so much. So what sits behind? Action research looks, takes there's different elements of it. So participatory action research, there's systemic action research, where we're looking at, my study was partly looking at systemic action approaches as well, because we're looking at policy reform. collaborative inquiry, cooperative inquiry, World Cafe, appreciative inquiry, and including quantitative methods. So the whole different labels in this action research family. And what sits behind it, the key characteristics are human flourishing, practical issues, knowledge and action, participation and democracy, and emergent developmental form. Okay, I think there was something else I put in here about how, you'll never get it through ethics. My experience is that this approach aligns really well with the National Statement on Ethical Conduct in Human Research. Has anyone who's done participatory action research had problems with ethics? The only comment I'd say, so I had no problems at University of Wollongong with our ethics approach. Of course, because participatory action research is iterative and emergent, where we started out, and my disclaimer about where I broke the rules of participatory action research is, as a PhD student, I was required to actually do some sort of design to get it through the research process at the university prior to actually going out to engage my participants who were the co-researchers. So there was an initial pre-design of it. However, once the Carers Action Group came on board and we started to work together, and we changed tack, we moved in different directions. That led to, I think, I don't know, over the course of the 2 years we were active in the group, that led to probably about 4 ethics amendments. So, you do have to be prepared to do ethics amendments. What we're going to do now is we are going to have a little look, and if we can have someone help hand this out, that would be helpful. So what we're going to do is work in our groups, and we're just doing a little simulation of what co-analysis would be. What we're going to do is we've got an extract from the National Carers Survey data, and it's around employment and income just because that's pretty generic. And people at home, if you want to do this exercise, you can find it through the web address. Okay, we want to get home this afternoon. So what we might do is just maybe each group can just share if they've come up with other sort of insights.
I think our observations were very much at the summary level, sort of as has been indicated, but certainly from the text, it seemed like carers, as they described here, are an older group. There's a large fraction of carers that were not of working age. 1/3 had already retired. For me personally, the main thing that really jumped out was that the main income source was employment. That was only true for a quarter of the sample. So certainly the group being reported on here is relatively different from the broader population.
Yeah, so we were discussing that almost 2 in 3 respondents to the survey received the carer allowance. And this is a little bit different from my personal study, like my research and among the 11 carers, a lot of them are not aware of the carer allowance or payment. So we think maybe it's important to know how the National Carer Survey, the scope of the survey and how they recruit carers. So maybe there are some carers, I don't know, maybe from a hard-to-reach community will have different experience, things like that. Yeah.
Or to do an analysis of the CALD community groups versus their access to the carer payment. Yeah. Yeah, our carer group.
Okay. All right. So I think I had something initially I wanted to say, but also I just wanted to reflect on something that I heard that was coming out of the research groups and regarding the carer payments or carer allowances and what that data kind of like speaks to. I think, I look at it from my own experience, and when we were contemplating different payments and things from, it's kind of like when I look at it, I think of like the why, like why are people perhaps not utilizing those payments as much, or why, what would encourage them to use it more? It just seemed like a lot of hard work to get a very minimal amount. So I was co-caring with my mum, and we both were working different hours. So we kind of were able to schedule around each other, and essentially both end up working, very, very long days, because I'd either get up very early to teach a yoga class and then come home and care for my dad all day and then go out and teach in the evening in order to kind of make ends meet. So I guess that also reflects that element within it that's talking about like the gig economy, like that felt really, or, you know, working for themselves, or my mum also owned her own business, so had that flexibility to create her own hours, but that then also meant she didn't necessarily get sleep ever. So I think when I look at it, I really think about like the why, and when you read this, you can't help but get a little bit emotional as well, because reading elements about having to cut back on work, or having to miss out on certain, you know, opportunities of growth in the workplace because they may be aware of your situation and understanding of your situation in the workplace, but they're not necessarily willing to give you the flexibility or the what's the right word here? The consideration when it comes to certain elements to make it supportive for you. So when I first started caring for my dad, it came at a cost of me giving up a full-time job because there was no flexibility. I think I took a few days off for carers leave, but that was lumped in with my leave for sickness. And so when it came time for me to have sick leave, I was denied that sick leave and had to take unpaid leave. So, you know, I look at it and I just think, what more does this say about the people that are in these experiences? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah.
I suppose following on from that, interestingly, talking about the why, I hadn't really thought about this until like just now. I left my job at the end of 2023 and I was already working remotely, and I sent my resignation email and I had no exit interview. No one asked me why I was leaving. I literally just got an email saying, cool, you're done. And then I handed my laptop back at the beginning of the year. Like there was no conversation around potentially that like I just couldn't keep doing this job. One, it was pretty miserable because I was caring and I was working remotely. I didn't enjoy it, but it wasn't like there wasn't even an understanding coming from the employer side about like how is there an arrangement that could make this work that would allow me to keep caring while still working. I do remember actually filling this out, Lucas, when we did this, and for me, reading this sort of. I remember, and again, I can't remember the questions exactly, but I remember thinking the present versus the reflective mindset of me responding to the employment, because obviously the fluctuations in work are so varied. You know, over the 6-month period, I could have been paid. I could have had like paid part-time employment. Then I could have done some casual. The other one that I thought was sort of missing is, and I never know where to put this, is advocacy remuneration. Like, is that employment? Is that just paid work? Is that other? So there was a few things, and I never know where to put that, by the way. Like I still don't. And I suppose lastly, on the main sources of income for carer households, interestingly, I struggled to work out what box, again, I would be in this, because say superannuation, for example, is superannuation for you or your partner, but my mum's superannuation was contributing to the household income. So it would actually be superannuation for you or the person you care for. So again, just like me not being able to find that individuality in putting myself in, you know, in trying to define where I am in the criteria that's set.
For me, specifically when it comes to this data, I don't really find it reflective of my situation because I am searching for work still, but like as a carer, I definitely lost out a lot of opportunities to grow my career because right now I'm actually passionate in film, media, and storytelling, but I couldn't really develop that on right now. And with myself graduating university already and still seeking for jobs, so I haven't applied for these carer income opportunities. So just finding out ways to provide financial support. But yeah, so my situation is just different, so I don't really reflect on this data presented here.
Thank you.
And just also one more thing, I think something as we spoke about just all together and kind of agreed on that was maybe missing or didn't really allow for a full picture is there's not necessarily like any identifying nature to the numbers. It's like where do these people fall? Who are they? And there was mention before of the Cal community, or also like the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community. They're obviously more remote. How do we know if their experience is being reflected? And I think that's a really hard thing. Like it comes with engagement in the first place, which is tricky. But yeah, how do we know that this data is really reflective of a full community? I mean, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. Sorry, I realized I actually didn't finish my thought about what I was saying. But yeah, definitely echo those thoughts in having that. Yeah, I don't want to call it individualistic, but seeing the people within the data, I'd say. What I meant by, present or reflective, when I'm filling out these surveys, sometimes I, as a carer, can get confused. I'm like, am I thinking about me in the now? Is this like, okay, answer this in relation to what's happening now? Or is this in the last 6 months, have you done this? And sometimes, depending on how the questions are designed, sometimes you might have done 4 of those things, but it's only allowing you to select 1. So it's just like, how do you sort of incorporate that dynamic nature of being a carer within the design of the survey?
Right.
Like being a carer is constantly changing. Like depending on what the level of need of the person you're with is experiencing, what other supports you're getting, it's, what it looks like today, it could be completely different in 6 months' time. So I guess, the point of a survey is a timestamp of that moment, but it's really hard not to be reflective or kind of looking into the future about it as well while you're doing it. And I guess as well, back to what I was saying before about I'm reading this data and I became quite emotional reading it because I really didn't actually think about how that first workplace I'd left because of a lack of flexibility or understanding until like reading it in this moment. And I guess somebody actually participating in the survey would feel that simultaneously.
I think just to conclude, in our little simulation of co-analysis, we see just, with obviously the more people you have looking at data, the richer it gets. But I think, thank you. Thank you for your participation and sharing your insights and knowledge, which as a research community, we respect as equal to our insights and knowledge as researchers. So thank you, and I hope you found this a little bit helpful just for a bit of reflection and in terms of positioning yourself and perhaps thinking more about how you can engage carers in other aspects of research. Perhaps as we're walking out the door, we can just have another little think about, is there room for any reconsidering our perspectives on these points? Thank you.